So, welcome everybody. I know sometimes these Zoom things, we get blockage on the presentation, so we'll help. So welcome everybody. It's almost the end of January. I can't believe it. So it's Helen Patterson here. We're going to be talking about all things mentorship, one of my passions. We'll talk about creating a mentor culture, and we will open it up for questions at the end, but we are going to have an amazing dialogue today. We're going to talk a little bit about where to start if you are interested in creating a program or just getting involved in mentorship, the why it's so important, especially today. After these last couple of years, more and more, it is so important to have people in your corner. We're going to talk a little bit near the end about being a great mentor and finding one. And I'm so excited to have a Q&A and discussion with Stacey Dakin, who's the Managing Director of Mentor Canada, who I'll introduce a little bit later. Before we begin, I'd just love to start our meetings with an acknowledgement of the land we are meeting today on. And at Life Works Well, we have been continuing our journey toward reconciliation. We all have a part in this. We are on the traditional territory. I'm in Toronto, many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and many more diverse. So feel free to chat, put in the chat where you're from as well, where you're located, and honor the peoples that came before us and this beautiful land that we get to share. Oprah, one of my biggest mentors, I'd love to meet her one day, and often quoted. She is really such an inspiration, but there are many people as everyday mentors who you may not even realize are mentors that are there for you as well. So today, just really briefly, I'm going to just whip over these slides really quickly because you will get them. There's resources at the end. And then I'll bring Stacey out for our chat, but just as a starting point, my focus is organizations primarily, and I've also worked with associations with their mentoring programs. I believe in mentoring, coaching, sponsorship. There's some differences. Mentorship is really such an amazing experience for me. Being a mentor, being mentored has been so rewarding. At an organizational level, it helps encourage, your growth, whether it's personal or professional. We can talk about all the stats in a minute about attracting people, retaining them, engaging them, bringing excitement into their life, and knowledge share and exchange. There's so much value in it. So I often say, why don't we create more of a mentor culture in our organizations, in our communities, and in the world? Because when everyone is lifted up and learn and grow, I'm sure they're going to give back to others. So that's sort of my vision for the world. Some stats, and again, you can get these resources will be available. This 70% of Fortune 500 companies stat has been around for ages. And I often wonder, though, whether those smaller organizations can also do this. Like, can we replicate the success that those organizations that have the resources to do this and do it well? So you can take a look at that later, but really the newer generations are really craving mentorship in universities and colleges and their communities. And even our youth and our children who were talked to today about with Stacey. And so I often say, so why is it then why isn't everybody doing this? Like, what is that? And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. So you can check out some of these stats. The links, once you get the presentation, will take you to some of the references. And I truly believe that this should be a new way in organizations. There's many ways. There's everyday mentoring, there's peer, there's group, there's so many opportunities to bring this in a variety of ways and not just a traditional mentor program. So there, with creativity, this can be done extremely well and be so beneficial to, I think, everybody in the organization, not just the chosen few or the high potentials, but at every level. If they have someone that is going to be there, guide them, have a reciprocal mentorship, this is really going to have a much more beneficial impact on our workplaces. So just for a second, I wanted to know in the chat if you've been in a formal mentor program. If you could just say yes, whether your organization has one or you participated in one in your trade association, or maybe one of the community ones, like Big Brother Sisters or some of those others. I do see, I'm going to hold the questions for now, but I will bring you out in a moment. So thank you for that. I see I just saw a hand go up, but it's the tech for me is a little bit tasking. So Stacey, I want to just welcome you. And Stacey's the managing director at Mentor Canada. I just met her recently. I reached out to her back before the holidays, and a few other people that I was really hopeful, because I knew it was National Mentoring Month. And I really wanted to bring this to my community and those that I know, and just really start that dialogue. So I reached out to her and a few others, and she kindly agreed to come and speak to us today. And I'm going to let her come out in a minute and talk about her journey, and just an inspiration. Love what she's doing, not only prior with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, but she was fundamental in the development of Mentor Canada. You can check out Mentor Canada as well. The link is there. She has over 15 years of experience, and I just am so excited to see what you're going to do in the future. So I'm going to skip through these. You can read them later, because we're going to talk a little bit about this throughout our conversation, about knowing your why, what do you want to bring, all of those things, and how to make a mentor program or mentoring in general successful. And for those that don't have a program, how to maybe find a mentor. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, and what makes a person a great mentor, or how to be one. So there's again those resources. So I'm going to stop the share, and as I mentioned, I'll send this later, and I'm going to start diving into the discussion with Stacey. And sorry, I think someone had a question. Syra, I think it was you. Did you want to ask that now? I think you had a hand up, I thought. Or did you want to just put something in the chat for later?
No, that was just actually responding to the question of how many of us have participated in a mentorship program.
Oh, great. I should have done it. It was a small group, so I was, didn't do a poll or something like that. But thank you. Yeah, I think it's really... the more we can share, and it's always going to evolve as well. So I'm just going to start in with some questions, and now I have to find them for myself. As a reminder, I'm not sharing my screen anymore, right? People that know me, that have been on these before, know that there's always a tech thing with Helen. I'm working on it. So first, Stacey, again, thank you. And I just thought, for everyone that's here, I would love for you to talk about your journey, and then what brought you to the world of mentoring, and where you are right now, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us.
Sure. Thanks for the invitation, Helen, to join. It was a pleasure to meet you, like you said, only a couple of weeks ago. And lovely to see everybody on, well, those who are on camera, the rest of you, I see your names, so that's great to see you. So Stacey Dakin, I am based in the Greater Montreal area. I'm born and raised in Montreal, but I'm an English speaker, so there's always a challenge when you're an English speaker in Quebec. it's a little bit of a different route that you travel on your journey to education and employment. So how did I end up at Mentor Canada? I didn't, it's not a career. Working in the social sector was not a career that I had planned for. It was not necessarily where I thought where I wanted to be. I didn't really know where I wanted to be, but fortunate as a teenager to have strong parents who were mentors and have people around me who inspired me. And I was employed, always had a job. And at one point, one of my colleagues talked about this program at Concordia University, which was human relations. Human relations, I did it over 9 years, my bachelor's degree, while I got married, had 3 kids, got a divorce, got married, and I got moved, and then changed careers and stuff. So I would say that I kind of fell into working in the social services sector. I worked in community economic development and community capacity building for 13 years with the English-speaking community of Quebec. And at one point in 2017, said to myself, I need to change. Part of the work that I did over those 13 years, though, was mentoring communities. It was not necessarily a one-to-one relationship, and it wasn't necessarily traditional, about individual goals. It was more about communities. How can our communities do better and achieve more? Then we did have a program around entrepreneurship, where we had a mentoring program for entrepreneurs, so aspiring business owners, small business owners. And then there was an opportunity of employment with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada that I applied for, and it was really, as most of you probably know, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada is well over 100 years old now. Started in the Catholic Church, but has evolved over the years into many different fields of mentorship, generally for younger youth, so those who are under 18. And really they have a prescribed way of engaging in the mentoring relationship. That led me to the opportunity with this idea of a pan-Canadian mentoring strategy, something that Big Brothers Big Sisters was engaged with their partners across the country. And it became one of my projects that I was leading as a project manager. And when we secured some funding from the federal government in 2019, I was able to transition into the managing director role. So Mentor Canada at this time today is not an incorporated entity. We are still being incubated through Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada in partnership with the Alberta Mentoring Partnership and the Ontario Mentoring Coalition, and slowly building that mentoring movement with frontline service providers, grassroots organizations. And the interesting thing that we found over time is there really is an interest to develop more of that mentoring mindset. So, not everybody wants to be part of a program, and not everybody should be part of the program. So how do we ensure that there's a culture, you use the word of culture of mentorship, how do we ensure that that happens across Canada, whether at work, at school, your social circles, how can we be more mentor-like with each other?
I get goosebumps when I talk to you. I just love this, and how we can connect our workplace and our community and our country and then the world. Like, there's so much opportunity. And yet, so I read on the so in the resources there is the report that you put out, which I would love to chat about. And I saw that there was 15,000 youth looking for mentors is something that I pulled out. And I just thought, is that like, so my next question was about the challenge. And I thought, what do you think is the main challenging in what I call this mentoring space right now?
So the biggest, there's a variety of challenges, and one of them for sure is the amount of youth that are on waiting lists, and that's just a snippet. So our State of Mentoring Research Initiative, which launched in 2019, and obviously slowly after we launched, we hit COVID pandemic. And so it was a little bit hard to have a high response rate. Everybody was tired, and we launched it in 2019, just before the holidays. And then most of our surveys obviously were taking place in 2020. And I think most organizations were surveyed out, right? They've been surveyed about what's happening with COVID. So I say that because it's important. It reflects a smaller response rate than we had anticipated. So that 15,000 youth on a mentoring, on a waiting list at a mentoring service provider, someone who's offering a program, is only 126 organizations in Canada. We know 126 organizations is a fraction of how many programs that exist, how many organizations. So 15,000 is probably, you could probably easily double it, maybe even triple it, and know that that's how many youth in Canada are on waiting lists. Just in Alberta, they have over 1,000 that we know of. So it's for sure we have youth who are saying, I want a mentor, and they're going, their families or the youth are going to the programs directly, registering and waiting. We have mentors maybe who geographically could be a match for that youth, but because they're located so far apart, and the tradition is to have face-to-face mentorship. So that's an obstacle. How do you facilitate a really close connection over the web? It's not the same. How do you demystify this notion of mentoring, that you don't have to be a superhero? Actually, we don't want you to be a savior and come in and try and fix that kid or get that kid on the right path. That's not the goal, but yet there are some that believe that in order to go and be a mentor, you have to have some sort of superhero abilities, right? And that you have something really to offer, and really what the youth needs. And we work a lot with the youth sector, but we do also work with the corporate sector and work with those who are dealing with young adults who are going from post-secondary into the workplace, or they're changing careers. But in this example, and the majority of the people that responded to the survey were those service providers working with youth under 18. So how do you build this culture of mentoring when there's maybe a misunderstanding of what a mentor is? So, yes, there's youth on the waiting list, Helen. 2, how do you get more mentors to raise their hand, right? And then 3, it's also the infrastructure that exists. And I think most of you probably know the nonprofit sector in Canada through COVID-19. Many industries have been impacted, but the nonprofit, in this scenario is particularly impacted. Why? Because the number of requests for services, the demand for more mentors, more relationship, all of that has increased as a result of COVID. But yet the ability to fundraise, the ability to get government contracts, get donations, has not been in this as available as it probably had been. You can't host a fundraising event in the way that you've done before. So you're trying to figure out how do you raise the funds. And then employees are being impacted by COVID-19. Some had to stay home because their kids are home. Some caught COVID, some are having mental health issues, some are transitioning, changing careers. We've heard a lot about the transition of careers. So I think that the service sector is in need of some support. Definitely, again, finding volunteers, and then the youth that are on these waiting lists. The response is get more volunteers to them, right? Get more mentors helping them.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I, even prior to the pandemic, I'm sure it was a bit of a challenge, but that just hearing you say that and repeat it, and because they're the private sector, but yes, the nonprofit in particular, because if people aren't working or they're losing their jobs, they're not giving, it's just that domino effect. So and it's fascinating to me because there's so many people. Like if you think about 34, what are we at in Canada? 34 million now, around 35 something. Yeah, it's hearing my daughter even talk about experiences at university, I was very proud of her, of course, because she is a chair for mentorship in one of her, I think it's a STEM program at McMaster. And I'm like, she's following in her mom's footsteps. But she just said she was doing the matching. It was more of a manual process and everything. And, trying to get events, like how do we get everybody together? It's so different because they're not in person. And so this desire for it, and even I read one study, which was really interesting. It was a study out of the Caribbean, and they were talking about even younger than teens, like primary school age, like younger children, having that teacher or that coach or that person that, you know, had a relationship with them, not a formal thing, not even necessarily through an organization, that helped them see their gifts, or, you know, lifted them up and helped them believe in themselves and their history, the progress of how they did in the world. It's really interesting on how that impact. And so, you know, it's not only organizations. I mean, I would love it in every organization. What I would really love is how an organization could then also have some volunteerism and corporate social responsibility, and then maybe give time to their people to then give back to these community organizations or nonprofits. That would be like even an amazing thing. But it's a tough environment, I'd say. And even at the HR Professional Association, I'm the chair of mentoring. We are having, and Angie's a colleague of mine on the chapter, and we're having that challenge of getting people to just give their time. That's what it is. It's like their time, and to sit with someone and just be there and whatever they're dealing with. And so I guess there's learned skills there, which I think you might have mentioned some, you know, some skills building that might help with, maybe there's a fear of being a mentor or what's involved in it. I don't even really know. So I'm wondering what's coming up for Mentor Canada this year, 2022 and beyond. I know you're working on some strategy. Is there any particular project you're excited about that you want to share with everyone today?
Not necessarily a particular project. I think that the whole mentoring, Mentor Canada, you know, we just spent the last 2.5 years in a pilot phase, right, where we were being incubated through Big Brothers Big Sisters. We have founding partners, and we really just needed to come into our own. We needed to experiment and see. You know, there was an idea that this, and many of you maybe have heard of Mentor National in the USA, that that concept and that group that's been around over 30 years, that's something that could be replicated in Canada. You know, it's been a conversation, an idea, a wish for at least 20 years in Canada, but there just was never the drive or the funding options that were available. So when we launched in 2019, it really was a pilot. Let's see if we bring research to Canada and we start looking at the impacts of mentoring in the Canadian context versus pulling the data from other countries. If we set up the digital infrastructure, meaning we make a Mentor Connector platform, which the Mentor Connector platform allows service providers to post their volunteer mentoring opportunities for free on this platform. And then as individuals, we can go and search by our postal code and see, oh, there's a mentoring program in my community. I'm interested in this one. I can apply. If you're a family, you can look and see if there's a program for your youth and you're available. So in your community, if it's available. So research, the technologies, training for mentors. So on mentoringcanada.ca, there is the online mentor orientation. So it's a free 1 hour. You know, you go through the program by yourself, so it's at your own pace, but it's 1 hour. It gives you a sense of what mentoring is, right? So if we created the tools that allow people to see themselves as mentors, will they then go to Mentor Connector, find a program, apply, and move down that path? The other was around communications. Not everybody defines mentoring in the same way. They really, there's a very, very varied definitions, you know, confused with consulting, with coaching, with, well, there's a, you know, they're my friend. It's a very loose, mentoring at its heart is really about relationships. So it doesn't really matter what you call it. What we want for mentoring is for whoever is being mentored or is being a mentee, that there's a reciprocal relationship and that you have the best interest of the other person in mind, right? You're really there to ensure that the other person is set up for success, and whatever you can do to help them is the point of that relationship, right? And then the last piece was really around partnerships. So a lot of our organizations in Canada were working in silos. So they were all doing their own research, creating their own platforms, and developing their own programs when we know that there are good programs that are working. So how do we scale those programs? We know there are some programs that if they're just slightly improved can have better results. So how do we help them? And then there are programs that are just not very effective. So how do we stop those programs or redirect those programs so that they can have a better impact? The biggest fear we have at Mentor Canada is mentoring is popular right now. There's a lot of funders that are giving money and saying, we want you to include mentoring in your programs. There's a lot of employers who are saying we want mentoring programs. But if mentoring is done wrong, it can have a damaging effect, right? You might hurt someone and you might put them on the wrong path, or you might, there's potential for abuse and authority in a mentoring relationship. So how do we at Mentor Canada support the quality of mentoring across the country? So, what we're going to be working on: quality mentoring, establishing Mentor Canada as its own entity, and really moving out of the pilot phase. How do we uplift and support all of these organizations that are doing great things? And then how do we collectively talk about mentoring across Canada so that we're raising that interest and engagement in mentoring?
Wow. I just take a moment to say thank you for doing this for Canada. People that know me that are on the call know how excited I get about this, but I had mentioned to Stacey about my journey, about an idea that came to me in 2017, and I was silly and I said, I'm going to write a book about mentoring. And like now it's like years later, but so as I was starting, it was, there was like 12 mentoring platforms I found. I did find national mentoring in the US, and I was sort of, looking around, looking at studies, and then it was just an idea, but I've been doing all this research. And so everything you just said about the differences between mentoring and coaching and what is it? And there's so much confusion because, the coaching industry's boomed, as you know, and a lot of people are out there still saying they're a coach, mentor, or the mentor, but then you're paying them. And I'm like, oh, that just gets me going. But that's this topic for another day. But everything you said about it's just clarity and some understanding. So providing all these tools, it's just fantastic. And I think, I'm seeing this more and more, these stats coming up. And now, just so people know, there's about at least over 40 mentoring platforms that I'm aware of. That, and I mean technology by that, not programs, because you'll see a lot of them in associations, right? Those associations that'll have their mentoring programs, trade associations, or like the HR professional association or the marketing association. So there's lots of that. And in the nonprofit, I've seen, more. I have a colleague, and I'll put a plug in for Black Mentorship Inc. I believe that I connected you to, and she's already registered for that. And I thought it would have been lovely for her to know about this before she sort of went on this path, but it's great to connect, and she can get some support from Mentor Canada to build her dream and vision, because and that's the thing. So I'm really looking forward to continuing to follow you. Just so everybody knows, like there's a National Mentoring Month, which again started in years ago, I believe, in the US. And I have been wanting to go down to this summit. It's happening right now today. So I'm hoping the recordings will be available for some of it that I missed, but it's a great thing. And I assume that you'll be doing in the future, like potentially when the world opens up again, having events. Because I remember, I think I've even attended in the past some Big Brothers, Big Sisters events, fundraising events years ago, through corporations or whatever.
There have been national summits in Canada. There was one in 2014, there was one in 2016. We had one scheduled in 2020 that was supposed to happen in Ottawa, and then 2 weeks before March 11th hit, and we were in a pandemic lockdown. So our first mentoring symposium as Mentor Canada was canceled, but definitely the plan. And we're very close with Mentor. We have their same brand, and I've been to Washington 3 times, but opted out today and tomorrow. That's why my calendar was free. I was supposed to be at the Mentoring Summit and instead gave my ticket to my staff that have never been. So made sure that they had
Amazing.
an opportunity to go. But yeah, the mentoring summit is
Yeah.
pretty, it's pretty.
Well, and it's until I started again, it because of what was going on in my organization at the time. And this is what sort of started it. So it felt like there was underground, what I call underground mentoring. So there were these programs, but not everybody knew about them. And so it was again for emerging leaders or high performers, high potentials. And I thought, okay, this isn't right. I'm like, how? And even one of the directors that I worked with who said, I have people coming to me to ask me to be a mentor, and I'm not really quite sure how to do this. And then then she found out too, well, there's this program and I could have got support. And it's just like, this is a huge global organization. This is ridiculous. Like from the moment we come in, how is it like I'm 2 years in and I haven't even found out about this? So it got me on this path about it. And I also was speaking about, I love the beauty of reciprocal mentorship, because it regardless of if you're thinking it's traditional model, you're always going to learn something as a mentor. You're going to, get something from that. And so it's been quite the journey. So probably those summits, again, my headspace wasn't in there. And I was starting to look back to say, well, who were the mentors? And I had a couple of good experiences. And then I had a lot of informal, organic mentors that now I can say, oh yeah, they were there at the time I needed them. And I say, that's why I love Everyday Mentor. It doesn't have to be, as you said, Stacey, like you've done events where it's flash mentoring, or I don't know what you call it again, where you're just connecting people for a short period of time as well. I know there's so many things. So I guess and again, feel free. I will, like, if you have a question, we can have you come out. I've just got one or two more for Stacey, and we'd leave some time at the end. But I'm just wondering if you have some strategies for people here, whether they're private or nonprofit, or anybody starting out, about like how to bring it to their mentorship to their organizations if they wanted to. So,
Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, my first question would be, why a mentorship program? Like, it wouldn't even be my first question. My first question actually, what would you want to achieve? And then my reflection would be, is mentoring the right thing? Because there are people who are calling the programs or whatever they're trying to design mentoring, and really it's not mentoring. It's relationship building, or it's engaging in a different way, but it's not about mentoring. It's maybe coaching, consulting, whatever the context might be. So what are you trying to achieve? If you're trying to achieve, building relationships between folks in your either your business or in your community, where, as you mentioned, reciprocal benefit, right? There's someone's giving their time, they're there to support the other person in front of them on their path to employment, or supporting them as a youth. It's often about mental health and ensuring that those youth have access to caring adults around them. You really need to start with that. And then it would be, well, how do you want to run this program? Do you have someone, a human resource, that's going to manage it? Who's going to screen the volunteer mentors? Who's going to train them? Who's going to support them when they're in this relationship with the other person? Is it a group format that you're looking for? How long is it going to run for, right? So I think that there's a million questions you need to ask just to determine if a mentoring program is the right thing. If a mentoring program is the right thing, you go down the path. You need time to set it up, then you need time to recruit, you need pilot time. Usually I recommend a pilot phase just to get through the kinks, test out some platforms, some tools and resources, and then you can fully launch maybe about a year it takes. If a program is not the right fit, well, what about mentoring mindset? Are there tools, and there are tons of tools and resources that are available, but do you have an opportunity to train your staff? Do you have a book club? Do you have a library that you can share in a virtual library these days? But do you have a resource center that you can post some things around mentoring mindset? It doesn't have to be super complicated. It can be pretty easy. It just depends on where you are and where you want to go. and the level of effort you want to invest, because a mentoring program, if done right, can be pretty time intensive.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I did put again, some suggestions in the slides, because I'm the same thing, say the same thing, like start with your why, like what is it, what is the purpose behind it? And then maybe you can design what makes sense. And there's so many options, as you know. So lots of great stuff. And honestly, we could spend probably an hour on each of these topics or more, right? And like, let's talk about just how you figure out that program design, and having a program manager who's going to run it, the whole project, like any kind of project or program you're going to implement as well. There's a couple of questions in the chat. My last two were going to be about top tips for being a great mentor and advice for people out there looking, but we can, let's just take what's here. Okay, so Tammy had a question. What are your observations of mentoring in a virtual environment? I think you said you had two questions. Do you want to come out and ask, Tammy, or is it okay that I just read it? She said, what are your observations of mentoring in a virtual environment? Why don't we just start with that? Oh.
Great. Hi, it's Tammy. Thanks. I was just typing my second question.
Okay, well, let's start with your first one. Or do you want to ask the second one first, if you're okay with that?
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the observations that we had, and we did a study recently around the impact of more on the programs, the programmatic side, right? Because they're the ones that are in between the mentor and the mentee and can kind of observe the relationship. And generally speaking, it can work very well, but youth these days, and youth become young adults, so they're future employees. They're not necessarily into the phone, and they're not necessarily into Zoom. They maybe do a FaceTime, but really they'd rather talk to you on Discord or text you, and it's random and haphazard. It's not necessarily I don't understand when my kids text me half the time because they're using acronyms, but that's just how it is. So it's a little bit it's not impossible for a mentoring relationship to develop and for a connection to be built. It absolutely can happen, but it's different. It's different than sitting across the table from someone at Tim Hortons having a donut and having a coffee. There's also a different rapport that is built. And we've heard that it's the same with school, right? So it's not necessarily a mentor, but your teacher, your relationship you're building with your teacher virtually when you've had to do school at a distance is not the same as when you can go see them after class. It's kind of the same dynamic that's happening. And honestly, mentors are humans, and they're dealing with COVID realities as well. We are also zoomed out. We are also tired. We are also, dealing with the stress of potentially a job loss or a sick relative, or being isolated at home all the time by ourselves. So even our ability to give back is a little bit I'll say compromised. It's maybe not that dramatic, but we're not the same as when we're sitting side by side in Tim Hortons with people, right? Because there's an energy you can feel when you're together. So mentoring can happen virtually. It does happen virtually before pandemic and will continue in the future. It actually makes it way more accessible. There's a lot of relationships that are built and established at a distance that weren't possible before because you weren't physically in the same place. Whereas now, if you're interested in the HR profession and you live, but you're interested in a certain part of an HR profession, but you live in London, Ontario, and the best mentor for you is in Ottawa, well, you can connect to them virtually, right? So some of those types of mentoring relationships have been very, very fruitful. Did you want to answer too, Helen?
No, that's great. I'll just add, because I'm right on there. It's like I thought about reverse mentoring, which was coined by Jack Welch, I believe it was, in General Electric years and years ago. And this idea of the newer generations were teaching tech. And I thought that's the thing, is because now, you have to know Snapchat and texting and Discord and WhatsApp, and I'm like, I can't keep up, but that's the world. It's going to be the next, by the time you figure out Snapchat or whatever, you're on to the next. So it's you have to go with the flow and understand what people need. With my mentees right now, I often we do video, we do phone, we do texting, like whatever works. And it's often being there, you know, it's not always you try the structure, but sometimes they just need something in between. So that's fantastic. I think that's, you know, how do we learn it? And I love what you say about mentoring mindset, because it can be just for a short duration. It can just be a one-time thing. You know, you hear sometimes the flash mentoring or speed, where it's like, I just need someone to talk to for half an hour to kind of help me work through this. And so there's these creative ways that organizations could bring this in, but it's going back to the why. Is it an engagement? Because this connection is hard. We found the same thing in HRPA. I think the fatigue had a lot to do with it. We have changed the program now where it's not just within the chapter, and they've opened it up to all of Ontario. So I have people that are in Guelph or Peterborough, and I think that is good. It'll be, once the world opens up and we have in-person events again, you know, maybe then you can start forming, but there's opportunity everywhere. And so I guess that was one of my other questions, was about, you know, how to find them. But I think Tammy had a question, again, another one. She said she had two parts. So let's see what she says here. So much of mentoring focuses on the next career move or promotion rather than support in your career and development. With this focus, some expectations are not met. Any thoughts on this? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. So
in my personal life, I'm also a volunteer with Lean In Canada. I'm on the board of directors of Lean In Canada. And one of the mandates when I came on was this idea of a mentoring program. And knowing what I know about mentoring programs, I said, that's not what we want to do. Lean In Canada is a volunteer-driven led organization. There are no employees. So there was no way that we can have a mentoring program without someone having to coordinate it. And so we talked a lot more about this, the circles, the circles in Lean In Canada are really around smaller group of women, seven to 10, who come together on a common topic and encourage each other, right? So it's more that peer mentoring. And so your question, Tammy, is just leading me to think of that concept of peer mentoring. Like, depends. I mean, the program that you have, is the program that you have at your work about promotion and sponsorship and getting people from one level to the next? If that's what the program is about, then that's the result that you're going to get, because that's what it's supposed to be about. It's probably built into your professional development plan or professional improvement plan, whatever you call them, that you have a mentor that's going to help you get to the next level. If it's not about getting to the next level, then is it really you need a senior person to work with and consult with, or is it peer mentoring where you're supporting each other, you're mentoring each other? Most people probably can tell you mentors they've had in their life, but if you ask that mentor, were you a mentor to Stacey in 1997? They'll tell you, no, I wasn't her mentor, right? And so you will have people in your life that are for you a mentor, or someone you look up to, or someone you respect and you're inspired by and aspire to be, and they might never know that they're your mentor. So it's not exactly a response, Tammy, because you're talking about a program, but I think what you're looking for is more than the program. I think it's outside of a program of what your culture at your workplace should be about versus you're in a program, because a program usually has a goal. You're usually trying to achieve something, right? And just talking about your career after a little while might become stale. It might not, but it might.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Tammy, let us know if that answers your question, if you want to hop out or just put more comments in there. The one thing that came up for me, and I love that you talked about the circles, because mentor circles, the reason I chose the name for these rather than webinars, I know we put webinars out there sometimes, but it's really about that community and everyone's a leader, and there's so much, like the concept of circles, and comes from our indigenous peoples too, that is really that sharing and creating that communication community. So one way of getting it beyond just the career development. And I know a couple of organizations that, in addition to traditional mentoring, had these mentor circles as well. Lots of larger organizations, again, the ones I'm talking about, like IBM and ADP Canada, where I worked, they had the infrastructure. You still need someone that's going to help with the management of it, and what's the goal. And a lot of it was supporting women in leadership. A lot of it was retaining. And so you do need to know your starting point too, when you're thinking about, if you're doing a formal program, what you're going to be measuring. And so there's a lot of, I think people just think it's this easy thing. And maybe that's why it's not being done more, because it's not. It's like, they think it's a fluff, or they think it's something that, oh, everybody's talking about it, but how do we do it? And what you said early on, Stacey, about, because it's not being done, like it's not being implemented properly, it fizzles out, or people aren't committed. And so I guess that's sort of a couple things there. It's like, great mentors make it. So how do you become that? But how do you ensure that there's the focus and structure around it? You can have flexibility and fluidity, I think, within it, but it's how do you, it's all about this, how do you make it like stick and people are excited about it? I think that's the main thing. I know that's a lot I just rambled about, but I hope there was some sort of comment or question that you can pick up on. Yeah. Oh, Angie, do you want to come out and ask a question?
Yes, I wanted to sort of add to, thanks, Tammy, great question. And yes, totally agreed. And Stacey, thank you for all the information. I've been jotting down a couple of pages. Thank you of all your great thoughts. For me, what I wanted to understand is the community piece and building more what you talked about at the introduction, because in my experience, both in academia and in the workplace, having been mentored informally at in grade 6, and then also from learning to be to do my speech and having that whole fear of speaking in front of a room, and then building your self-confidence, and honestly, it stayed with me my entire life. But it was pretty remarkable, because I have to say, I remember rehearsing my speech with my mom in my room, and my mom doesn't speak English, but I had her make sure I didn't miss a word, and I memorized it, and I was so passionate about it, and it just stayed with me my entire life. It's crazy. And I won the speech award for the entire school. Anyways, let's not go there. But the point is, that to me was that informal mentoring piece that sort of came to mind that you had mentioned. And then also the community piece, and how do you, and the clear piece is exactly about clarity in terms of goals versus even in the HRPA, some, managing those expectations. Oh, so-and-so can be my mentor, so they can find a career for me, but it's more about that. And like you said, and defining what those expectations are right up front in a mentoring agreement that Helen and I actually circulated and tried to sort of get people to use. And it's not easy to do, right? Because you're doing this with others and trying to build a relationship and be mindful of time and all the other balls that are up in the air at the same time, is what I'm trying to say. But I'm really rather curious to hear about the community one. Like, that to me was like when you said at the onset about this community of mentors. So that's what I wanted to ask, if I may.
Yeah, totally. And you guys keep talking about the HRPA, and I coincidentally had a meeting with Louise last week to see how Mentor Canada might support the HRPA in Ontario. So maybe we'll be able to support you with your document that you're talking about. But going back, so community mentorship generally is the programs, right? The community programs that exist, and they're usually pretty small scale, meaning they're localized. So you might have a group that meets in Peterborough, and you might have different satellite offices. Like every community is different. It depends on the organization. They could be mentoring programs by region, but they could be thematic. It could be for youth who are in a inner city. It could be for Indigenous youth, for Black youth. There's a variety of programs that exist, and the Mentor Connector platform that I talked about before, we are still trying to populate it, so it's not at full capacity, meaning we don't have all of the programs across Canada there. But eventually, one day, hopefully, we will have a majority of the programs listed, and you'll be able to see what programs are there. Not all programs are always in recruitment phase. A big part of the year for recruitment of mentors is in August, September, right? Because a lot of them are affiliated with school. Mentoring programs happen in a variety of ways. They can happen through school. So the mentoring relationship is established and managed through the school system. And you probably have a mentor coordinator that's on site or that is affiliated to one of these service providers outside of the school that comes into the school to offer the program. There's others that are called on-site mentoring programs. So you have to go somewhere specific to be a mentor. That usually is a group mentoring program, but it could be one-on-one depending on the needs of the youth that you're matched with. And that means you might go to a community center, you might go to the office if it's Big Brothers Big Sisters. Let's say you'd be invited to the Big Brothers Big Sisters office, but then there's the community match, which is generally a one-to-one, which you would meet with the youth in the community somewhere, and you'd go and do an activity, and often a lot of these groups, they're able to fundraise and or fundraise through donation of dollars, but also through donation of like event tickets, right? So they might get if you're in Toronto, tickets to the NBA. And so they say, well, for our matches, we're going to give you 2 tickets, one for the little and one for the big, so so that you can go together to the NBA game, right? So there's a variety of ways you can get involved. You can either be a donor, you can, if you have access to tickets and you don't know what to do with them, or even Starbucks coupons, you can hand those out to these mentoring groups, and it just facilitates those relationships, because the end of the day, you don't want the mentor necessarily having to pay out of pocket to manage this mentoring, to be in this mentoring relationship, because it could be a deterrent, right? You don't want it to be only the rich who can afford to be a mentor. You want everybody to be able to afford to be a mentor and to engage in a mentoring relationship. And so how do you make sure that it's equitable for everybody to engage? So that's community based, and generally it's with young people. There are different programs that I know of in Toronto. There's the Access Mentoring Program, and they offer the speed mentoring. They've actually copyrighted speed mentoring, and that is owned by Access Mentoring in Toronto, Access Employment. They offer the is it called the, I want to say it's the Triac Mentoring Partnership, but I could be wrong. I forget the name of the program, but essentially they're matching immigrants. So immigrants who have landed in Canada and who are looking for their first job or their next job. They've gone through training. And so how do they match them to a mentor that can help them find employment, or while they're in their job, stay in their job, right? Because you might need some social support in your role in your job. So there's a variety of programs that you can work in that is not corporate. The big thing that we do, and Helen, you mentioned it before, it's the Power of Mentoring campaign. So what we want to do is those 15,000 youth that are on waiting lists, we want to create pipelines of mentors. So how do we engage in a very short session potential mentors? And those potential mentors, we're building partnerships with corporations. So we've worked with Deloitte, we've worked with Starbucks, RBC is a big partner for us, the Toronto Pearson Airport. A variety of organizations have engaged with us, and we facilitate a Power Mentoring event for their staff with youth in their community. Virtual allows us to connect them across Canada. So you might have a new relationship between a RBC employee and a youth somewhere, 100 miles away, and they form a mentoring relationship because they participated in a Power of Mentoring event. That can become an informal relationship that they met each other and now they call each other and they connected, or it could be through a formal program. They went to the Mentor Connector and found each other through one of the programs that are offered. So the idea really is, how do we encourage more Canadians to be mentors? And you have to make it easy for them. And making sure that there's funding for that, making sure that there's a place for them to find it. All of those are the little things that we're trying to do to facilitate those relationships.
That is
Does that answer your
fantastic.
question?
Yes, thank you.
Wow.
Amazing. Woo.
Well, there's so many,
Kudos.
again, creative ideas. Like I think about Triact. I know CIBC has a partnership with them. And so one of my colleagues was really involved in it from the program manager point internally, and they have loved it. And it's really just been, and it's really about, I love this because it's giving, you can have the volunteerism within your organization. So you give people the time to do it as part of their role, not like offline. And what a way to then give back. And so I think that connection is really great. And then donations, like not even thinking about that. So donating, like if you happen to have, some tickets for something, or you don't necessarily have all the time in the world right now, but you may down the road, but you can give in kind or those things. So there's lots of great ideas, but I think you're on to something. It is going to continue to grow. I'm really hopeful for it. I think that this, obviously I'm on board, as you know, the power of mentoring. So anything we can do to spread the word too, I'm really excited about that. We have a few minutes left. I don't know if anybody has any final questions. Really, I think, we've talked, there are lots of ways that people can find a mentor through your organizations, through others, but there's that need. And I just wonder, do you have anything to say about, what makes a great mentor?
Everybody wants the answer, and it's not a simple thing, because it really depends on who's sitting in front of them, right? Who are they going to be matched with? Like, I think at your heart, you want to be able to give back. You want to support someone and in their path to their success, how they define success. And that could be, someone who doesn't want to work right now and needs to deal with their mental health, and you're able to support them through that, right? A great mentor needs to be open to developing a relationship on the terms of the person that's in front of them. And they need to be ready in case it's not a fit for the mentee, that they might, this relationship might end. You just need someone who's able to put the person, and I'll repeat it again, the person in front of them first and themselves second. They're not there to save them, they're there to help them. And I think that you've got a recipe for success. There's not much else that you need. I mean, unless you have a mentoring program that has a specific, goal, which is you need to get someone from one level in their career to a next level, then it can't be someone off the street. It really has to be someone who has a specific skill set. But, community mentoring, peer mentoring, I don't think you need to have a certain skill set. You just need to be available, and the rest is it's a relationship.
Really building the connection and feeling, that you're growing. Well, this, I don't know about everybody else, but I think this was fantastic today. I certainly learned a lot more, and just am so excited to see what's going to happen in the future in Mentor Canada, but also across Canada, and that power of mentoring and moving the movement. I just thought, if anybody wants to put in the chat, a key takeaway or something that, that resonated with them today, we'd love to know that. As I mentioned, anybody that registered, I'll send the slides. I'll send the recording will be on the YouTube site, but I will send that out to those that participated. We'll also send a little bit of a quick form to just let us know how we did, what you liked, what you'd like to hear in the future, what worked well. And yeah, I just think that I am so thankful today for your time, Stacey. And I'm so glad we connected. I know we're going to continue to stay in touch. And I just really, really, truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend with us. If anybody has any further questions for Stacey or myself, send them my way. We'll make sure we connect you. And yeah, I think, mentorship, it's something that to me, it's about time and giving space to people and being there for them, as you said. And that power of mentoring is really going to have a ripple effect in the world. So everyone have a great day. Thanks again, Stacey, and I'll send you everything after. And I hope everybody enjoys their rest of their January.